You're listening to Adopter Stories with the Adoption and Fostering Podcast. In this episode, Suzanne shares her story of adopting a 6-year-old boy 15 years ago.
The reason that I came to adoption, or the way that I came to adoption, was that I was coming up to 30 and my long-term relationship had broken down. Interestingly, my ex-boyfriend was an adoptee, and we'd gone through the usual routes of trying to have children. It hadn't kind of happened, and we were looking at going down the IVF route, but the relationship was already breaking down. So at 30, just after I was 30, I found myself single again. Just started uni, was a year into uni, and was really thinking about prioritising what was important, and decided that actually I really wanted to be a mum rather than perhaps be a wife or a girlfriend and then become a mum. Being a mum was my priority, and I knew it was something that I'd always regret if I didn't do it. And so I was thinking of the different ways of doing it, new foster carers and new adopters. And then discovered that one of the other girls in the family had adopted as a single woman, and suddenly realised it was kind of a possibility. So I spent an afternoon with her having a chat through about it, and from there decided that it was something that I really wanted to do. So then I approached the local authority. Didn't approach anybody else, I just went straight to the local authority. Didn't really think they'd be interested, didn't know what the reaction would be, and they were really, really positive. I was working in a really tough school at the time, so they kind of snapped my hand off a bit. Talked through fostering with them, talked through adoption with them. They were putting questions to me, and then said to me, it sounds more like I wanted to be a mum rather than I wanted to be a foster carer, that I did want to be a mum and I wanted to fulfil that mum role. So I went from there and put the application in, and it kind of all went from there, really. Spoke to my parents on the way through and kind of sounded them out what they thought, but not really anybody else, and then just kind of started the process. I started the process in 2002, and it was a long time ago, so it took quite a long time. It took 18 months, and went through the usual. I went through the interviews and then got to the prep group, and it was okay. I was the only single adopter on the prep group, interestingly enough, and that was a bit kind of, I felt a bit out of it at times, but the couples were lovely, the social workers were great. So we did the prep group, did all the homework and all the other stuff they give you to do, and then started the bit where the social worker comes every couple of weeks, and you have the lengthy chats with them about the stuff, and everything that you've got to go through, everything that's got to go on the form. And she was really good. She was a very experienced social worker, so that was really good. And she kind of led me through it. We talked about stuff. There was a lot to go through because there was a lot there. She wanted to know lots about past relationships, obviously why I was single. She wanted to know a lot about family background, because that hadn't always been an easy childhood and with an easy family. So she wanted to know lots about that, obviously. And it was thorough, but I completely understood the need for it to be thorough. She needed to know I was going to be okay, that it was going to be all right. And as I say, she was a very experienced, and she went through it. She put some really pertinent questions to me about it all, because at that stage I was looking, really, even as a single adopter, I knew I wanted a son. I knew boys were the hardest to place, and I knew that my age range, which was 4 to 7, were the hardest. The boys are the hardest to place. And I remember her saying to me when I said, I'd really like to take a sibling group, I remember her saying to me, why make life any harder than it's going to be? And she said that to me on a few occasions, so she really made me think about things, and it worked. She she was sensible, and she made me think it was very much a process of we were going through it together rather than her kind of asking me questions or it being her decision. It felt like a joint thing that we were going through with the questions that she was asking me. And altogether it took about 18 months. I was approved in the April, and I remember them saying to me in the April approval panel, because I just started teacher training then, because obviously that's going to be a great idea, isn't it, doing teacher training while you're going through it. And I remember them saying to me at panel, what are you going to do if we come to you next week and say, oh, we've got a child that we want you to consider? And I remember saying to them, oh, that's never going to happen, is it? And they kind of said, well, your age range 4 to 7, don't be surprised. And that was in the April. And then by a couple of months after that, she brought me the profile of the little boy that I adopted. So even though it felt like things were going really fast, it had been a very thorough process, and I'd had enough information and I'd spoken to enough people and I'd done enough reading that I really felt that I knew what I was going to be up against and how it was going to be. I was approved in the April, and then he actually moved in the October over the summer holidays, because I was teaching by that point. So over the summer holidays, I was dressed, frantically trying to get the house ready and get everything done that needed to be done, ready for him, ready to go to matching in the September, and then for him to move in the October. So like I say, it was about 18 months, but I really did feel that it needed to be that length of time for me to fully understand what I was doing and to be confident, really, as confident as I could be. Because then in October, this 6-year-old whirlwind kind of arrived. So introductions were 6 days long, which didn't really feel like a lot. Felt really fast, and there was a lot to learn within 6 days, but we just kind of cracked on with it. I got my head down and got on with it, and it was like, didn't seem 2 minutes and I was bringing him home for kind of good. And that's where it all felt like it really started then. It felt like that was the beginning, even though it wasn't. It felt like the beginning of, it was the beginning of being an adopter and being a mum. It was exciting. It's really exciting. He was 6. He was very much what I saw was what I got. He was full of it. He was desperate, absolutely desperate for a new mum, and very excited to have a new mummy as well. So that it made it in a lot of ways a lot easier. He wasn't resistant to the idea. He was desperate to be loved, desperate to kind of do anything and try anything and just be out there and with his mummy. So it was a fantastic time, really. It really was a great time. Hard work, but yeah, we had about a month before he went back to school, and obviously that was all a massive change. But he was very sociable, loved playing out with the children on the street. It was like one of those old-fashioned communities where you all sit out and watch the kids. So that was what we did. So he was fine. There weren't many misunderstandings. And then he was just desperate to get to school and get on with it, really. And that's just what we did. It just became part of, this is what we do. This is who we are. So we did it. I don't know whether we were lucky, because I kept saying to the social worker, because they kept talking to me about this honeymoon period, and I kept saying to her, when's this honeymoon period going to end? When's it going to end? And she just kind of used to look at me and raise her eyebrows. At that point, it felt like hard work, but it didn't feel like an insurmountable task. A lot of the hard work was just because I wasn't used to looking after a 6-year-old, and he was absolutely full on from getting up in the morning to crashing out night he was absolutely full on. He needed entertaining, or the only time we got any downtime was he'd sit on my knee and watch telly for a little bit. But we were constantly out on bikes, scooters, at the park, in the swimming pool. We needed to be out every day, and he needed to run that energy off every day. So it didn't feel like a challenge. It just felt hard work. And it felt like that for quite a long time, actually, not a challenge. He had his moment, could get quite angry. Like I say, it didn't feel like a challenge. It just felt like constant hard work. Yeah, so we just kept going. And I think I was so tired for the first, might have been 10 years or something, that just kept going. Just like, be all right, just kept going. And we had some fantastic times in that. That was it. That was just what happened. Yeah, there's a massive but around adolescence. There's a huge oh dear around that time. The biggest difficulty has not actually always been around him. There were challenging times as he got to adolescence. As he got older and wanted more independence, that became very challenging, about finding those boundaries between keeping him safe and giving him a little bit of independence, so that he could kind of go out and be his own person. My stepdad's into motorbikes, and so my son was always on the back of the motorbike as a little boy. He got to 16 and he wanted a motorbike, and like you do, he had a motorbike, which was great at the beginning, and then obviously you get into the more, where is he? What's he doing? Who's he with? And that got difficult. Just finding that balance between him being safe and understanding risk-taking, and that thing about adolescence and risk-taking behaviour. And then the turning point was 18. That I don't think anything can prepare you for your children being 18. The challenge has always been that balance between allowing him to be independent, allowing him to make his own mistakes without him making absolute catastrophic mistakes. And I still find that a really hard balance to get through. So he got to 18 and things just became really difficult. He wouldn't accept, it's really difficult now to put it without kind of making him sound awful, but he wouldn't accept that as his mum, perhaps I sometimes did things and said things because I was worried about him, or because I knew I could look ahead and see the consequences of things. And he just got to the stage where he felt he should just really be allowed to do what he wanted. And then within that came back a lot of stuff that he'd obviously witnessed in his birth family, and that impacted on me as his mum. And it just got to the stage where it just wasn't possible for him to stay living at home anymore. We'd had some fairly awful times. Worried about being in the car on the motorway, driving very fast with him. And it just got to the stage really where I thought it's just the relationship needs saving. Our relationship needed saving more than him actually living at home with me. Because he's got learning difficulties, he went into supported living just past his 18th birthday, really, the summer after his 18th birthday. And in a lot of ways, that was better for the relationship. But then I think he must have felt a huge sense of rejection again, that I'd rejected him because I'd never said to him, you can't live here anymore. I'd said it to the social worker, there's just no way. I wouldn't ever say it to him. But I know that he felt a huge sense of rejection. And then the challenges really began, because the challenges weren't so much about his behaviour. The challenges were about trying to get professionals to see that the 18-year-old man really wasn't functioning as an 18-year-old. So when they talk about things like capacity and choices and all those kind of interesting things, I could see the other side of it. And there's been some really scary times where he's done things that I've thought he's going to end up he's going to end up dead, or I'm going to end up with a knock on the door from the police, or he's going to end up in hospital, or he's going to end up in prison. And I've been saying to professionals, look, this is going to happen. And they just go, well, it's his choice. He's got capacity. He can do this. And that's really been the biggest challenge of all, I think, trying to get people to understand what he's experienced and what he's witnessed before I adopted him, and the impact that that's had on his life going on, really. I remember when he was in primary school and during a PE lesson, his teacher couldn't understand how he couldn't lie on the floor and close his eyes to relax, as they did relaxation as part of the PE lesson. And I was trying to explain to her in terms of his experiences and his fear of his hypervigilance, and also his fear of what could happen. And she just didn't get it. She said, we've got to separate his experiences from his learning. And I just thought, you don't get him at all. You're never going to understand what he's been through and how that's impacted on him, on his behaviour and on his memories and everything like that. And that seems to be a common theme running through, particularly now he's 21, that professionals now look at where he is now and don't necessarily see what's got him to that place now. I don't know what they see, but I certainly don't think they see that scared little boy that I still see. The biggest challenge that I find for me, knowing what I can and can't do, and knowing which battles to fight and which ones to just kind of say, I ain't got the energy for that today. It's going to have to wait another day, or it's just going to have to be what it is. Because I'm sure people look at me and think, God, she's a pain in the neck. This mother who's constantly going on about trauma and limbic system and the amygdala and all this stuff. I think they just look at me and think, oh my God, she's going again. So yeah, that's a really difficult bit. If I was turning back the clock, I think I would concentrate more on the brain stuff, really. 17 years ago when I was going through prep, they were only just starting to look at the brain and brain development. It was all about attachment, which is, it's in there, isn't it? But I remember I did Bowlby as part of my degree, and so I was very clear that I needed to bond with him, and that I needed to take him back to being a baby, really, and do all those things with him that I would have done if he was my baby. So I did all that. I used to feed him with a bottle, and when I bathed him, I used to wrap him in a warm towel, and used to sit on the loo, and I used to sing to him and things, and we did all that. But I wish I'd known more about how trauma impacted the brain, and I wish I'd done more like the sensory integration stuff and all of that kind of stuff. I think that's what I'm saying. I wish I'd known then what I know now. And that's what I'd do differently. With hindsight, we always say it. I wish I'd known then what I did now. That would definitely help. I don't ever regret adopting him, and I would do it all again. I would adopt again. If I was younger, perhaps I might do it again. I'm really interested in using what I've learned over the past 15 years, and I still keep thinking about fostering. I've never thought, I wish I hadn't done this, because it has been the best thing I've ever done. I wouldn't ever say no. I wouldn't ever say no. I'd definitely not ever say it to a prospective. But yeah, no, I would never say no. For all the difficulties and for as hard as it's been great as well. We have had a fantastic family time, and even though he is nearly 21 and it's still challenging, we are still very much a family, and he does still come to me when he needs support and he needs help. And he will always have me, whereas other people, you know, his friends move away from him because he just gets too much. And, you know, people get disheartened, don't they, when you're trying to help someone and they don't do what you want them to do. But it has been a great time, and it will be again, even if it's tricky at the minute.